Love podcast, hate nonsense. This is the PoliticsJOE Pubcast.
Way!
Yes. I don't love saying that when we've got a guest in the studio.
Why? I think it was better.
I'd be more offended if you didn't hate nonsense. That would be much more of a problem.
Well, Ed normally gets it the wrong way round, and then he's like, "Oh no, crap!"
We have to do several takes. It's a whole palaver.
John Trickett loved it.
Did he?
Yeah,
Good
he
for
was
him.
like, he stared in amazement. He was like, "I do love podcasts, and I hate nonsense."
There's quite a few people on YouTube are like, "What are they saying? Love podcasts, hate nonsense." And I'm like, what does that
Maybe we
mean?
should say that. Maybe we've been like, "You dirty, filthy, filthy-minded creatures."
It can be both. You can hate nonsense and nonsense.
Nonsense would be quite good for the sort of twee Twitter humour
Yes.
that's going around at the
Yeah,
moment.
definitely.
Yeah.
I'm joined, as always, by Ava Santina, Ava Evans, woman of many names, and man of alliterative name, Jacob Jarvis. How are you?
Hey, yeah, I'm good, thank you, mate. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Lovely to have you here. You
Thank
are
you.
a presenter, producer
Yep.
on multiple podcasts.
Yes.
For example, The Bunker. And
Yep, that's the main
Oh
one.
God, What Now?
Oh, God, what now?
Oh God, What Now? If the audience is not aware of you and your prolific output, how would you describe yourself?
How would I describe myself? Well, yeah, I mean, you just described me pretty well.
Thank you.
I would say, to be honest. But yeah, we've got The Bunker, which is an everyday news and politics sort of explainer, which is, I think, quite good fun, but also smart, but not kind of annoying with it. And then Oh God, What Now, which came out of Romaniacs and is sort of a whole, fuck Brexit, what's going on, vent fest, which I think is pretty good fun as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And Ollie was on that last week.
Yeah.
And
he came in.
it was a good episode. Good
Well,
listen.
I mean, I couldn't say otherwise whilst I'm here. But no, it was.
No, he's not here. It's fine.
No.
We just did. He wasn't here earlier. We did another record. No.
Yeah, we can say
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Alright.
Fine. We did another record earlier, and so we just did our impression of what he would say
Okay.
about the House of Lords appointments that Liz Truss is hoping to
Well, I
get
know
through.
he defended Charlotte Owens quite a lot
I
at one
know.
point on your podcast.
Yeah, he did. It was-
didn't he?
it was
well,
his-
kind of, he played the devil's advocate.
Yeah, but to be fair, it is his daughter. So
So we're to talk about, it's a real truism in kind of media circles is that people in the media love to talk about the media. It's like a busman's holiday,
Yeah.
almost. So I think we'll talk about kind of with the PoliticsJOE and Podmasters and Oh God, What Now? We're kind of small fish in a big pond with big fucking huge whale sharks
Yeah.
surrounding us. So we'll talk about like the UK media landscape and whether it's good or not, which I could have said that better. But anyway, what is your assessment, Jacob, of kind of the current media landscape and how do you see kind of the work you do fitting into that?
I think it could be more gooderer in terms of we're going to talk about how good
Thank
it
you
could
for saying
be.
that to make me look better.
But yeah, it's just kind of, well, it is what it has been for a very long time, which is dominated by legacy brands, which maybe, the purpose is not necessarily to convey news or to do journalism. The purpose is influence and power. And that is why, to me, a lot of those outlets maintain having the funding they have and having the positions they do, because, we know less and less people read newspapers now, but for whatever reason, every single politician still really gives a fuck about everything they say. And you kind of wonder, well, why is that? And then, you see at the moment that there is a kind of silly season going on and they need to fill themselves, and they'll fill themselves by just going, oh, what do you want to say that's completely unhinged today? And they can just kind of text in. So, I mean, I think it's fair to say that the media landscape is not in a wonderful state of affairs when it comes to the higher echelons of it. But I think there are, there's nice, punchy organizations which are doing different things. But I think then there is a concern all around that with how niche you are, where your funding comes from, how much you can do, the way you have to use your resources and the way that you need to use your resources to get reach. So I think it's unfortunately, we're in a position where the news media used to feel kind of quite in control, I think, of the societal narrative and in the way that it wanted to go itself. And it's becoming more and more, to use a really drawn out metaphor, something that feels like a kind of boat that has been bossed around by waves and will go whatever way, politicians or other people with money or power kind of want it to go.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's true though, isn't it? Because I mean, most outlets are loss making.
Yeah.
I mean, especially TV, rolling news, it's extremely expensive to do that. I mean, why on earth would you still have a linear channel now, knowing that no one really watches or consumes your news that way, if but to, in the pursuit of influence? I'm messing up now, my words as well.
And it's also a kind of a branding exercise too. It's that those major organizations can kind of go, well, look, we do the sensible, important stuff. And that's why you maybe shouldn't give us so much shit when we do the horrible stuff we do as well. Which, smaller places like yourselves, like ourselves, we've got our outlets and they are what they are. And everything kind of has to be gone towards being something that fulfills the audience in a certain way. Whereas if you're a massive legacy brand, you can go, hey, let's do the stuff that makes us, look respectable, whilst we can also do whatever the hell we want on another angle and choose what we want to serve up, because we can do so much at the same time.
I think it's interesting is something, if you take like the Telegraph has a really good women's sports section. They were kind of like leaders in that market when like that women's sports started to be taken more seriously in the UK. Yeah. But a lot of the
cursed day that was, wasn't it?
Was it?
I don't know.
But kind of, there's probably, the Telegraph has probably published multiple editorials about the scourge of the woke lionesses, or something like that. Yeah. It's like it's interesting. The kind of with each outlet contains contradictions.
Completely. I mean, we launched a new podcast called Papercuts recently, looking over.
I was wondering if that was yours as well.
Yeah.
I love that podcast.
Oh, thank you so much.
Cut this out. Cut.
Oh yeah, please go listen to the podcast.
We're going to bleep that.
But I find myself now very early in the morning reading through all of the papers, and reading through papers that, I've always tried quite hard to read a mix of different newspapers, because I think they all have their perks, as much as we like to shit on them a lot. And the podcast does. If you want to shit on on papers, it will do that as well. But then, the Telegraph, I can be astounded by the international coverage. Can be absolutely incredible. But unfortunately, it's sort of behind, pages of sort of Nadine Dorries' diaries or whatever it might be. And it's the same in the Daily Mail, can have some amazing stuff, which will campaign for important issues and women's issues and stuff which the other papers won't necessarily do. But unfortunately, then they'll go, hey, Boris, do you want to write some utter shite for £100,000 or whatever it might be?
Daily Mail, very anti-noncing. Just as a concept.
I think all papers are that.
But they've done, how many campaigns have they done?
Well, like behind the pedos.
Yeah.
At least one, I imagine.
I don't know.
But I think all outlets are
That's reminded me of that time that I said to that Tory MP in a green room, like tongue in cheek, like, if you had one policy that you ran on and it was a capital punishment for paedophiles, you'd win.
You'd win every election.
And then he went on. I was watching him from the green room say it on air. The advisor was sitting in the green room like, no.
That's like seeing in action, like, when someone says that a politician will just repeat the last thing they heard.
Yeah.
That was that in action.
Yeah, it was great.
What do we think? So there's been you mentioned they're kind of like small, punchy organisations. There's a lot of ones, thankfully, still thriving, but recently a lot of shuttered, like Galvin shuttered. BuzzFeed UK's, I think, ceased operations. Vice is in trouble.
Yeah.
What is it that makes? Why are these outlets get a lot of following and a lot of hype, and people enjoy them, but they just struggle to kind of turn it into making it sustainable? What do you think is it that makes that so difficult?
I think to punch through a lot of the time, you have to kind of gamify the whole thing. So I spoke to Ben Smith, who edited BuzzFeed News for a little while recently, and it kind of felt like a lot of the ways that these places kicked through was things like Facebook traffic, and then you just simply can't decide what Facebook is going to do forever. So you can game Facebook and you can work out what's going to go on for it, and then they can say, fuck off, we want to do something completely different now, we want to use different platforms, we want to use different publishers, we want to make you pay for it, and it's going to go down. And we've seen that with Twitter now. We've seen Elon Musk just go, we're going to completely crush your Twitter numbers and pay for us if you want, or don't. Then you have the conscious issue of going, well, from a branding level, should I be paying for it because people won't like that about me? So I think a lot of these places will, when they peak, it's by coming through on something which is, often good content, but also working out a strategy which allows them to push that forward. And those strategies aren't necessarily of their own accord. It's using something else. Whereas somewhere like the New York Times has persistently been incredibly successful because the New York Times does what it does and has always done what it does and will always do what it does and has faith that it's really, really good. And so it's just stuck through. They've also got buckets of money as well. But I think some of these other places you will see them switch tack, should I say, because of these external pressures. So, that can work really well for people for a short amount of time, but then you can quite easily have the rug completely pulled out from underneath you.
And the New York Times kind of have messed up a little bit recently because they've brought on extra, arms and legs or whatever the professional term for that is. I mean, like
Staff?
Well, yeah, no,
It's called Wordle.
The Athletic was a huge loss maker for them. I think it was $8 million or something like that. It just absolutely, but they're keeping.
Well, I remember I worked for a local paper when the Athletic was kind of deciding to go into British sport and go into football. And it was just crazy. They just came across with such an aggressive strategy of just going, come do the exact same job you're doing, but we'll pay you twice as much money because we're an American company.
Yeah. Do you know who else did that? GB News.
Yeah.
They really did.
Oh, yeah, they pay stupid money.
Stupid money.
Yeah.
But then it's like, how much is my soul worth? And frankly, it was too much, is what they were offering me. So I said no.
My soul's not actually worth that much money.
How dare you?
But this goes into the sort of wider thing of, you do have to consider how much people are being paid. And I think as well, you think of these sort of smaller organizations which, perhaps can't pay their staff so well. And I'd see it when I worked for the Evening Standard for a little bit in online news, and people would persistently go to the Daily Mail and the Sun because it was just a pay bump instantly for doing the same thing. And that was going from somewhere that was also a legacy outlet. So if you then consider that you're, somewhere that's plucky, giving people opportunities, maybe taking people who are lesser qualified, people from different sort of backgrounds, unfortunately that may also coincide with paying them less money at the same time as what some of these places do when it's smaller, because, you're providing someone a platform they might not get at a legacy place. But then somewhere legacy comes along and goes, well, we're just going to take the talent and pay them more money. So how sustainable can that be? To be a journalist and to not have some variety of kind of family financial backing, sometimes I think people would consider to be quite misjudged. Really.
Yeah, I think that's why I always get frustrated when we're specifically on the left. I have never worked for these outlets, but people will criticize certain journalists who take roles at the Mail, or I'm not even going to say the Sun because that's but the Mail or the whatever. And it's like, well, you have to get a roof over your head. You have to put you have to somehow live and subsist, and then hope that one day that will lead on to you doing the actual journalism that you'd eventually like to do. I mean, realistically, when you come into this job, you're getting paid about 21,000. Yeah. It's really not very much money. And then you have to live in London or Manchester. How do you afford to do that if you don't have your parents paying for it?
Yeah, my first job working in journalism was for a news agency. So it was just kind of, the Mail, the Sun, the Times or whatever would just get hold of you and send you out to court or send you out to do a death knock or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And I mean, that got me into journalism. And it did give me a good grounding in training. It made me do some sort of, a lot of work that I didn't enjoy doing very much, hence why I don't do it anymore. But that allowed me that foot through the door because, I didn't maybe have the resources to go and do a master's course somewhere in London and then go and do some part-time free journalism somewhere or go and do a week's work experience somewhere for free because I couldn't get to London. I lived in Leicester for a little while and now my family are in Lincoln. The cost of getting down here for a week was just not sustainable.
And they've closed all the local papers. Yeah. But that's where the classism comes into it, because there's sort of this assumption that if you want to break into journalism, you kind of like the journalism people turn around and go, where would you like to go? Yeah. That you welcome you in with open arms. Oh, that kind of leads nicely into, so when you first get your job in journalism, I didn't realize that we were going to do such a media heavy podcast, but hey, here we go, guys.
I hope you're enjoying.
When you first get your job, a lot of the work that you'll be doing on the daily is copywriting. So there will be a story that comes in from Press Association or Associated Press, and then you rewrite that in the style of your newspaper, and that goes online. And you basically do that about 18 times a day. And then there's this really fancy leaderboard in the office, which basically ticks up how many clicks your article has had, and you are rewarded by getting your salary if it's a good number.
It's like a target incentive for like clicks online, isn't it?
Yes.
So, some places will do bonuses for it. I mean, and a lot of people just want the kudos of being the most read. And, I've been in a newsroom where you would get a monthly email saying this person is the most read journalist this month.
Yeah. Well, we
have to read that too. Everything is just, yeah.
We found 2 examples online of some quite good. I would click this article. I think
I did click the article.
So the first one we found was from which outlet?
They're both Express.
So they're both from the Daily Express, both online. But the first headline is GB News praises Princess Kate's well-shaped backside after ex-IRA man's vile tirade.
Isn't that great?
It's just like, it's got everything the Express wants in there.
That is an absolutely like textbook bit of, I don't even know if it's clickbait, because you are getting what that is promised. You are getting an article about.
Well, I think there are plenty of places which want to write a headline before they write a story.
Yeah.
Or they want to find the things. I remember when I worked at The Standard, there was a story about people were doing so much coke in London, and then it was going into toilets and then going through to eels, and the eels were getting high from cocaine. And I did the follow-up story, which is cocaine in the Thames is another problem eels don't need, which is like a constant British problems meme all the time. And that was just literally, it's been there like, the eel story is doing so well. And we're like, but what more can we write about it? And I was just like, I don't know, really. And I was ringing up fucking pie shops saying, like, you know, are you worried about this? And they were like, we obviously don't get our eels from the Thames. So no, we're not remotely concerned by this. And I was calling up, these people are just looking at me like, what? Well, not looking at me, just going down the phone thinking, what are you talking about? Yeah. And then I just found this sort of quite well-meaning Waters guy who, I said, you know, is this just another problem eels don't need? And he said, yeah, it is. And I just thought, well, there you go. Really that's the headline.
Was it Fergal Sharkey?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, it wasn't Fergal Sharkey. We had someone in the office the other day actually who didn't know Fergal Sharkey had been in a band.
That's us.
No way.
Oh yeah.
It was you.
I was on my way down here to interview him, and then
one of us mentioned
Ed was like, "Oh yeah, he got great songs, Fergal Sharkey." I was like, "What? What do you mean?"
I just thought he was a really popular water person.
Yeah, that's what I just assumed. And thank God he said that.
That appeals to you. I think like you're one of the few people who a really famous water person would appeal to.
Yeah.
Like a water expert. You'd be like, this guy rules.
I did. I was only following him for his, his
takes on
work on the rivers.
Take on safe water.
Look, I've got a big interest in the waterways and our Victorian plumbing system.
Well, that's good. Everyone needs a hobby.
Not as good
you
as
and the eels probably have the same amount of interest in water.
Yeah. Well, me and the eels are all turning up in the city on a Thursday night to talk about fintech. So, you know.
And podcasts.
And podcasts.
Coked out to the gills.
Okay, this other Express headline was good because this is like SEO. Do you know you're trying to hit every single click possible? Yeah. So it's Carol Vorderman and woke banks prove Brexit was just the start of fight to save Britain. What's happening there?
That's good. Carol Vorderman, hate figure, as in people on the right hate her.
Yeah.
Woke banks, people fucking hate woke banks now.
Yeah.
Monzo, people hate Monzo.
Cashless, hate them.
Yeah. They hate that. They hate 5-minute cities and they love Brexit.
5-minute cities? You've even
that'd be so fast.
That'd be tiny. Imagine that. That'd be good.
No, that sounds
it's unfeasible.
No, a 5-minute city sounds like prison. Like that 15-minute is like, you can glacially walk around like you're in Nintendo.
In prisons, they get plasma televisions.
Well,
so they might as well be a city.
Flat screen TVs.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, have you ever not seen a flat screen TV in the last fucking 20 years? Seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the idea of a 5-minute city. I feel like I would save some money, just get healthy, just chill out, maybe see loads of people.
A 5-minute city wouldn't be as healthy because you have a shorter distance to walk. A 15-minute city, that's like a nice walk. Yeah. 5 minutes is like, you're barely leaving your house.
Yeah, well, it's basically Stoke Newington. It's pretty much city, really.
Yeah. That was a real London media class joke there. That's one.
Yeah, I had to bring it in. I'm here from the Centrist Podcast.
Hackney.
Yeah. And on that, so how is centrism?
How is centrism?
Speaking of Stoke Newington. Yeah. The reason Ava said that.
I'm really regretting making my bio on Twitter centrist lad for a bit now, and then now it's pulled in straight away.
Yeah, so it's on my notes. The self-described centrist lad.
Yeah. I mean, that was mainly taking the piss. But I now see that when I meet people who don't know who I am, that sounds like that is who I am.
Are you regularly in a place where everyone knows who you are?
Yeah. Jacob Jarvis from Hunger.
Well, it's just, maybe it's just I don't really like meeting too many new people. It's sort of like in a professional context, that's fine. And then outside of it, I just think, come on, I've got friends. I'm 30 years old. I've made friends. I've got family.
That's good.
I've got like 4 siblings, man. Like juggling that, like
that's hard.
There's no point in more friends as well.
Busy guy.
Much,
yeah, that's a ton of people. That's like So
That's like 4 times as many people as you know.
I know you.
Yeah.
And that's it. So the reason that wasn't just a personal attack from Ava on Jacob, we wanted to kind of actually talk about kind of the role of centrism off the back of an article in the New Statesman by Finn McRedmond, where she basically argues that centrism and centrists present themselves as a kind of non-politics. Like, we are the sensible, we don't do politics. Politics happens to us, and we are like the reactive.
I like by me just being here, you've gone to we. You're part of us, one of us. You've joined the
Just by
centre.
osmosis. I'm being pulled from like that.
Yeah.
So
they're sort of like the control variable by which everyone else kind of...
And she argues that that is not the case. For example, she says, the centre ground in politics maintains 2 fictions about itself. First, that it is above the emotional pinball of politics and is instead grounded in reason. The centre never makes culture war. Second, that the centre is the standard bearer of public civility, positioned in stark contrast to the brutishness of both the left and the right. Obviously, Finn did a much better did much better explaining her point than I did. What are your thoughts about that, Jacob? Just that kind of position.
I mean, I think the main difference in all of British politics that we kind of don't speak about as clearly, because we're clearly in one camp of it, is just very online and not very online people. And I think that's we can talk about this widespread of partisanship, but I actually don't know if I honestly believe the country or people that you meet on a day-to-day basis are as split as that. I think there are just some people who have spent way too much time on Twitter or X or whatever it might be today, and that's made them naturally gravitate to certain places, or algorithms have forced them into gravitating to certain ways, and that's created this split. So I mean, I'd say that as one point I think is a more useful distinction actually when we talk about the real world than maybe we give it credit for. And I think by virtue of being very online, we've just been talking about online media outlets, and now we're talking about something which is largely based around what people would seem to be saying on social media. So that I think is one part of it. And then I also think it just depends on what you consider, how you consider a political descriptor. Is it a fixed variable? Is it a way you identify yourself? Or is it a sort of prism that frames the way you think, for example? So I would consider myself to be relatively in the centre when it comes to politics, not because I see that as somewhere where it's like, that is who I am and I will stay there and I'll always be there, but because I think, if someone's got a good idea from somewhere, then I will listen to the good idea. I want to hear the good idea and discuss good ideas. And so there can be things where I can sort of move around a little bit there. So it kind of, it's when people talk about being progressive, say, and, think of people in older generations who have gone, well, actually, I am really progressive because I was super progressive in 1994 and I'm more progressive than my dad. So fuck off.
I took E in 95 at like a Brit
exactly.
or something.
And it's because then their Overton window is like they're way more progressive than like their dads were, say. And then they've frozen in time at a certain point. Whereas I would suggest to be a progressive person, you have to be constantly considering progress and looking forward to more progress, because you can't be progressive unless you want more of it. You can't freeze in that. And I think that's what I would say also about the kind of the centre of politics. For me, is not something I necessarily see as a fixed place where I am or where people have to be.
I'm quite liking the footballification idea of politics being just online and not online, because then that also ties into the whole GB News mantra, which is we're talking to real people
about what we saw on Twitter.
Exactly.
I think it's always very embarrassing when you have to explain to someone who's not online like a beef that you're aware of.
Like when Cillian Murphy was doing some media round and he said he didn't know what a meme was, and I just thought, I've never been so jealous of a person in my life. Like, one, he gets to be Cillian Murphy, and two, he didn't know what any of this shit is. Like, can you imagine Cillian Murphy being like, did you see the latest beef with, I don't know, Sophie Corcoran and Femi? Like, he would just be like, what? I don't know who these people are. Like, imagine trying to explain like who Russ in Cheshire is to him, and he would just wouldn't know.
It is painful that I know who those people are.
Yeah.
Imagine the more useful things I could know than that.
I thought that, but that reminds me of Matty Healy not knowing what an essential oil was. Like, he was like, oh, I'd like petrol is my favourite essential oil. I would love a world where my life isn't dominated by various oils.
Yeah. I could imagine someone coming into my sauna actually and just putting fucking petrol on top of the thing. People come in and just put all sorts of essential oils on.
A lot going on there. Do you
time.
really have a sauna?
No, I don't own my own sauna. No. I don't. But I go to a sauna, predictably in Hackney where I live. And yeah, sometimes
Not the
just
Turkish one in Dalston.
No, that is amazing. Have you been to
yes,
that?
I have.
The one that's kind of, it's got like PVC garden doors
Yes,
and
I
just more
have.
marble than you've ever seen. Yeah, I really...
It's incredible.
I love it there.
I have
And
that.
like
Yeah.
sort of men just in boxers come in and
That's
hang
why
out.
I go.
And the water is so painfully hot.
Yeah.
No, mine's just like, a normal gym sauna. I say I'm pretty, normal.
Yeah.
And I know I don't come across as a normal guy, but
Yeah,
I am, more grounded than I seem.
No, definitely. No, you absolutely are.
Thank you. Thanks for
You're
engaging
so-
with that in such a
he's the
serious and
most-
polite way.
the most
doesn't make
normal
me sound
guy,
more like a wanker.
It's not my intention at all. You're a normal bloke. And everyone thinks that. Drop a comment if you think Jacob's normal. Yeah.
That's not even Jacob. This is actually doing Ollie Dugmore the entire time.
Yeah.
So Charlotte Owens,
Yeah.
We're
really,
We're back to
we
Charlotte.
need young people in
Yeah.
Parliament.
What is your thoughts on the current role of centrism? I suppose it's less about the concept of centrism and more about the current centrist figures, I suppose.
No, because every point I have has been rendered futile by that really apt description of politics being online or not online. I now can't revert to talking about online politics as if it's
Do you know
somehow
what I thought? Do you know that
omnipresent.
The article in the New Statesman last week about Grace Campbell? We're talking about Grace Campbell. If you don't know, Grace Campbell is a comedian who's Alistair Campbell's daughter.
So your sister.
So my sister. Who,
I did see people who genuinely believed
think
you
that-
were Alistair Campbell's
people
son
think
online.
people think that. I used to get quite a lot of tweets blaming saying like your dad should be in the Hague. And then my friend recently, my friend Hannah got a text from one of her friends saying, just spotted Alistair Campbell's son in a bar.
Oh my God.
And took a photo of a guy who looked a bit like me, and then sent it to him, and then it wasn't me. So anyway, I'm not.
So it wasn't you, and it also wasn't his son.
No, I don't think he has. Does he have
No,
a
I
son?
don't think he
Anyway.
does. He's also really quite pissed off about this in real life, which is why it's even funnier.
I bet he is. But
Sorry,
anyway,
I know this is like your crowd. Sorry.
No, he's he came onto our podcast. He's very intense in real life, so I can imagine if he's pissed off about something, it's not
Yeah.
great.
But
So I think Grace Campbell is very, very funny, and I'll say
Yeah.
no more.
What my point about Grace Campbell is, someone wrote a think piece about Grace Campbell, which if you are just, say you're a 70-year-old subscriber to the New Statesman, I don't know if this piece went to print, you're not online, whatever, you'd be reading like, what? Like Grace Campbell isn't mainstream famous.
But she's adjacent.
But this
She's
pulls us back
adjacent.
to another sort of media thing that I read about recently, which is the mullet strategy. And it's basically, so hear me out here. It's kind of so on the front page of your website, you'll have like cool stuff that makes you look like a serious news organization. And then you'll go, oh, if we write about, I don't know, what Holly Willoughby was wearing on This Morning today, 40,000 people will Google that, and then they'll use us for SEO, and they'll come to our website
Right.
and they'll read all our
Okay.
stuff. So you get these places which will do, serious news up front and then go, party in the back, get everyone in. So I don't know if this is quite an example of that, because I think it was, a little bit more thought through than something like that. But there clearly are places which will just go, oh, right, this is the stuff that can pull people onto the website, but people wouldn't pay to subscribe for that. So
Yeah.
And a lot of this profits off of the culture war, right? So that is the main driver. And what we wanted to talk to you about was the culture war at the next election. So I don't know if you've got any ideas.
Okay.
So considering the premise that at the next election, the Tories are going to fight using the culture war, right?
Yeah.
They're going to be picking up the the best buzzwords to try and somehow sling some red meat to the voters. What do you think will be the main pieces of that?
I mean, I think a lot of them are in a really kind of 2010s sort of mindset. And so therefore, I think migration will come back to it, because I think that did used to be something which really moved votes. And I don't know if it necessarily will as much now, but, you've got these kind of people who, and so we did a bunker episode recently about this with Rob Ford and how people change their minds on migration. I mean, a lot of the current ilk of politicians were around in that kind of Ed Miliband era for Labour, and you would have that narrative that people didn't like austerity, so they would like to vote for Labour, but then they didn't trust Labour on immigration, and that really worked. And for me, I think this current incarnation of the Conservative Party is kind of wanting to show that it is more sensible, for want of a better word, and kind of more of the David Cameron and George Osborne era in some ways, which is why people like Rishi Sunak have been put to the fore, but then are also wanting to say, but everything is a culture war and we're going to engage in that wholeheartedly at the same time. So I can just see it being a kind of bit of a retro culture war on immigration again, which I don't know if will really work for them. But I think a reason why they would do that as well is because Rishi Sunak surely does not see, if he were to lose, he does not see this as the end of his political career forever. He's too young. And so he needs to lose with some variety of dignity. And when you look at migration, their sort of base are the sort of people who will be really, really fueled up by that. So, I mean, we're seeing that at the moment. I know you guys were speaking about that in your sort of more reactive podcast today. So, yeah, I think that to me looks like just a really obvious one that they will cling to and a really obvious one that they can throw at Labour that has a wide... They see it as a wide appeal, despite it probably actually being their base who cares so much.
I think that's quite a generous interpretation of Rishi Sunak's motives. I think Rishi Sunak thinks he has absolutely no chance of furthering his political career or continuing his political career unless they go balls to the wall. Unless he goes chucks the kitchen sink at the electorate. They're so far behind in the polls that like what would a dignified loss be like?
It's still going to be a complete and utter trouncing.
Yeah, so I think, and so he'll be humiliated. Is it better to quietly? He'll be like, it'd probably be more dignified just kind of accept, to fall on your sword, and accept, just take your meds and take the beating.
Just be swept along.
But he's like, well, oh my God, my political career is going to be over in my 40s. Yeah. Like, when has a former prime minister come back and done something notable in politics again? He's going to just go on the lecture circuit and make.
Well, that's not fair. I think Theresa May, without risking sounding like a centrist, but Theresa May stayed on, and I think she's made quite a.
But I think she's not Rishi Sunak. As in Rishi Sunak doesn't have the same motivations as Theresa May.
No, of course not. Do you think he'd stay on then as leader of the opposition?
I don't think he would necessarily stay on, but is he the sort of person who thinks he could kind of linger around and have some variety of position or clout in the future to some extent? I mean, because to me, he just feels like there's that mindset of when you're that well off, like what can you actually do that gives you some variety of satisfaction? And for some extent, that is power and being around public life in the way he is. And I can't see him being massively interested in being a sort of constituency MP in the way that Theresa May seems to have, going on happily, had photos taken with potholes. I mean, I can't really see Sunak kind of, unless he's going to get in one for like a sort of hilarious photo shoot like that, which would be quite nice. Sort of like a reverse Elf on a Shelf with Sunak down in a pothole. But, I can't see him wanting to do that. But I can see him, lingering around and thinking he has some variety of clout left. Because I think these people don't, he's, to me... Again, though, I think you're also right that we sit around and pontificate about their motives being any more than just arrogance and bluster and self-preservation in whatever way that might sort of encapsulate itself today. So, yeah, maybe I am being more generous that he would want to stay around, but I can't see him being a sort of person that thinks he would just, roll over and let it all take him.
He's not doing a David Cameron.
Yeah, no. I hope no one else does do a David Cameron, really.
Is that... Do you have any more thoughts on the culture war?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on the culture war,
excellent.
Actually.
Would you like to
thank you. If you could both leave.
Yeah.
And I'll now start listing them.
It was power hour on the culture war.
I mean, you asked me what I thought the main things would be. So what do you think it's going to be?
I think cashless society. I think that's going to be a big one. And then gender identity, which is an obvious one. But... I just think the cashless society one is going to be, I can just really see like the Gary Sandbrooks and the Lee Andersons going back to their constituencies and doing sort of petitions or fights to get the banks reopened. And, this is what Labour wanted to take away from you. And,
the bizarre thing about the cashless society thing, though, I see is that surely, major people who maybe benefit in there being cash transactions are people who are paid cash in hand. And there are some people maybe who do claim benefits and then have some jobs on the side and get some extra money. And for me, to be perfectly honest, if we don't give people enough money and benefits, and if they can do that to support themselves in some way, good. Like, it doesn't really bother me in any way, despite it being, something which you could would be considered illegal in whatever way that might be. People need to live. We need to give them more money if they can find a way to get more money. But that seems strange to me that would then be such a conservative talking point. And be able to track money more would be able to let them go, and we'll track all the scroungers.
Yeah.
Don't you worry, and we'll track all the cheats. Whereas, there's some levels of sort of cheats that you could maybe go, well, actually, there's maybe a leftist argument to say, well, we should have some cash around to be able to say, oh, this person is struggling and they're down the luck, and I would like to give them a little bit more money to help them out, and I would like that not to be tracked, though they don't get in trouble for that.
Well, did you like the argument? Did you see this was being posed by a few of these backbench MPs that victims of domestic abuse would not be able to escape their violent partners because they'd be able to be tracked by their credit card? And it was like, when the hell have you ever spoken about women's refuges, or when have you ever been interested in domestic abuse?
But I think the interesting is it's kind of like worst person makes a good point about kind of the cash and stuff. It doesn't just apply to people on benefits or who need it for cash in hand jobs. Like if you're an older person and you can't work your NatWest app to like move money around, it's much easier for you to be able to go to a cash machine, get cash out, and conduct.
But the big point with that is that there aren't any branches of banks left, and that's because the presiding government didn't get involved in that and allowed them all to close.
True, that's why it's worth personally.
My grandma doesn't have a bank account.
She doesn't have a bank account?
She doesn't have a bank account.
Really? She's Al Capone?
Well, she is Italian. She gets her pension out in 50s.
That's sick.
It's just in her bag. I mean, there was one time that someone tried to mug her, and my grandma, who honestly, I've said this before, she looks like a used cigarette, and she wrestled this guy to the ground. Like, it was quite obscene. She was not letting that handbag go. No way.
Fair. I think that is fair.
Yeah. We can wrap it up there if you like.
Shall we wrap it up there?
Yeah. I don't know what we talked about.
Your grandmother looking like a used cigarette.
Well, you fancy her, so that's the...
I've never seen a photo of your grandmother.
No.
Anyway.
You fancy her vibe.
You sound sick.
Something about it.
Used cigarettes. Yeah. And old women. Anyway, Jacob, thank you very much for joining us.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for having me.
Eva, thank you for being here as always.
Oh, well, thanks for having me.
Excellent. Remember to subscribe to the PoliticsJOE subreddit and check out Jacob's various podcasts, The Bunker, Oh God, What Now? They're all very good and come with
and Papercuts, which is really, really good. Thank you. Has John Elledge on it, who is amazing.
He's great.
Cut all of that out.
Anyway, join us next time. Thank you for watching.